You're listening to the Veterans Heritage Hour on the Vets on Media Network.
Good morning, Arizona, and welcome to our listeners from around the globe at 1700 GMT time. And my name is Joe Brett, and you're listening to the Veterans Heritage Hour. This is a special to the Veterans Heritage Hour, and I couldn't be happier to have as my guest today a celebrity, Fahim Fazli, and co-author Mike Moffat. Fahim just recently appeared in the movie American Sniper. He was a consultant to Charlie Wilson's War and was in that movie. And he's got a great story to tell, and we're going to let him tell it. But first, before we start into this show, we always set the time period in which these stories take place because students and for students and teachers, et cetera, to download and use this in a classroom environment. And we have a history professor here in Mike Moffat, and we have an actual living, breathing personification of history in Afghanistan here in Fahim. So let's get it right. We'll start this off by talking about the invasion of Afghanistan. Fahim, when did that take place?
First of all, I want to thank you for inviting us to your show. I'm honored to be this show. And I want to thank every veterans coming to this country back. I want to salute them. I want to thank them. And I'm appreciate them a lot. I love America, and I love our Army, Marines, Navy SEALs, Air Force, and I have a lot of respect for them. In 1979, the Russian invaded Afghanistan. I was 12 years old. Of course, they came in over there. They took overnight in 24 hours Afghanistan, and we couldn't breathe. We couldn't escape. And my mom was working for she was a midwife for Afghan president. My dad was a president of a national bank. And the Russian come over there, took in 24 hours Afghanistan. They, of course, in a year later, 2 years later, they killed 3 million Afghans. And later on, thanks to Ronald Reagan, thanks to Charlie Wilson, come out with the idea how to defeat the Russian, which is Charlie Wilson always said that to Ronald Reagan, to tell Charlie Wilson, the only one way we can defeat Russian or Afghan power and American stinger, which is we have a history of defeating. We're very good fighters. We are guerrilla fighters. We defeat the British 3 times. We defeat Genghis Khan. We defeat Alexander the Great, and Russian can be next. And my dad was so stubborn. He wouldn't leave Afghanistan. My mom, my 2 sisters and brother escaped Afghanistan, and my dad hold me and my brother stay in Afghanistan. Then I lost interest in going to school because they were teaching communism. Mm-hmm. And I become a little 12 years old, 13 years old, a freedom fighter, which is I consider myself, I'm honored to fought against the communism. And
the Russian and the Soviet army.
Right. And I was using a slingshot. I did a lot of damage as much as I can. And of course, I pay my dues for that country. And I want to thank Charlie Wilson and Ronald Reagan, America. Without their stingers, probably the Russian probably stay there forever. Like Czechoslovakia, Poland, and all those countries got invaded. Nobody helped them, but Afghan defeat them, and thanks to Charlie Wilson and
so you and your dad stayed in Afghanistan for a while, a year or more, maybe
3 years, three more years,
and then you finally made your way out.
Took one morning, my dad wake us up in the morning, 5 in the morning, and said, "Let's go see your mother." So we didn't know our mothers. The communists separate us. The communists separated us for 5 years, 3 years in Afghanistan, 2 years as a refugee camp in Pakistan. Yeah, he wake us up in the morning, and we took a 7 days, 7 nights walk towards Palachinar. And we arrive in Palachinar in Pakistan. As soon as I go over the peak of the mountain, I saw 3,000, almost 3 million refugees, which is Charlie Wilson was there at that time. And he was helping the Afghan. And I saw, that was remind me the Jews got tortured and doing World War II, that similar camp. The reason I know about that scene, because Russian used to show us the propaganda TV in black and white. We saw the Jews got tortured. Now I see my own people get tortured as a refugee camps over there. And we took we went to the embassy, and the embassy, that was my first time. I saw good-looking Marines, 25, 26 years old. I'm saying, I want to be him one day. Then later on, thanks to Ronald Reagan brought us, and thanks to American brought us as a refugee, asylum refugee to America. We then started from there and came to California, ended up.
Compton, California.
No, Hacienda Heights, California.
Ooh.
Hacienda Heights, California. And that was my first place. Then follow my dream to go study and take a couple classes of acting.
Whereabouts did you do this, Fahim?
I was in Hollywood.
Oh, in Hollywood.
Hollywood, yeah. At Hollywood, took a couple classes. I wasn't that good in classes, and I'm saying I'm a natural born actor. I can do it by myself.
Well, that's for true. If you haven't met Fahim, he is a natural born actor.
Then it was fun. That was fun, and I can continue with my career up and down until 2006. I got a phone call from Paramount Picture, Mike Nichols, Charlie Wilson, and Tom Hanks. They says, we need your help because you're Afghan, you're born there, you've been in the war, the Russian war. And they invited me to be as a cultural technical advisor over there. They took me to Morocco for 2 months, and I gave all my best to give how to defeat the Russian. And the only one way can defeat Russian Afghan power. And I gave them all the tools. I gave them all the videos. I used to have it, and from the BBC News, CBS, all these places. And they like it, and I did such a great job. And Charlie Wilson is such a great guy. He said, Fahim, you did such a great job. Why don't you go help the real Marine, the help Marines, Army, Navy, Air Force? I say, how to get in? He says, do you have a clearance? Are you clean? You don't have a DUI? All these other stuff. I'm saying, no, I'm not a criminal, sir. I have a clean record.
It's funny that Charlie Wilson's asking you if you had a DUI. I had a little trust in. So let's stop we'll get into a little history here. Let's just stop the conversation, because I had a night with Charlie Wilson. I was at a party at Sonny Jurgensen's house way back in the day. I was a young veteran of the Vietnam War and partying hardy in DC, and my buddy Mike Del Negro got me hooked in with Sports Illustrated people and Dan Jenkins. And long story short, we're at the Congressional Open, and Sonny Jurgensen is there. There's a big ABC hospitality tent. We go to a big party at Sonny Jurgensen's house, and there's young scotches, as Dan Jenkins would say, on infinitum. I mean, they had waiters in tuxes serving young scotches all night. And so I wound up drinking young scotches across from Charlie Wilson, the congressman from Texas. And there's Sonny Jurgensen rolling around the floor with a guy by the name of Drummy. And he's asking me about flying in Vietnam, which I did, and what weapons were being used to shoot at me. Now, this was before the Afghan War. I remember that. I remember he was a naval gunfire officer on a deck of a ship or so. I don't know which one he was on, but I adjusted naval gunfire in Vietnam as well. So we hit it off. He was an Annapolis grad. Thought nothing of it until Charlie Wilson's book came out. I said, wow, and who knew? So let's just set an historical context here. And Mike, correct me. Mike is a former lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps. He's an historian. He's a co-author with Fahim, so he can fill this out and maybe he can add to it. But in the time of Charlie Wilson, when he was trying to, Charlie Wilson grew up, he was a congressman in this little district in Texas. Right. A place that didn't have any roads, it didn't need anything. So Charlie Wilson was always casting his vote for other people who needed stuff, right? So he incurred a lot of favors with other congressmen. And he was also very much involved with the defense of Israel. He took that on as a part of his being, an Annapolis guy, and Israel was his country and his cause. And so he was always a vote for the Israeli lobby. They could always count on Charlie Wilson, and there probably wasn't a Jewish guy within 100 miles of where his district was, but he didn't, and they had to vote in Charlie. So the Jewish lobby was always funding Charlie Wilson's elections in that little district in Texas that didn't need anything, and he was never going to get beaten, and he was owed favors, and so he rose up in power and prominence election after election. He got on, I think it was the Ways and Means Committee, Senate Finance Committee, or Congressional Finance Committee, but he had power. He was on the Armed Services Committee, and he was on the committee that steered money.
Right.
And he had favors. And so here is Charlie Wilson trying to get money to the Mujahideen, to create the Mujahideen for the CIA. He's pushing the CIA to support an effort against the communists, the Russians.
Right. But he did such a good job. He was begging the Congress to give me money. I trust Afghan has a history. Similar right now in Ukraine. If I was the government of the United States, I will get 30,000 Afghan freedom fighters. They're great fighters. They can push Russian out of Ukraine. That's my belief.
Well, see, now interesting. So last night on Charlie Rose, we heard Nick Burns, who was a former ambassador, and he's now on the faculty of the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard. And he was suggesting just the same thing, that the Americans are thinking about putting defensive weapons into Ukraine if this negotiations doesn't work out. That the way to defeat the Russians in Ukraine is the same way that they defeated the Russians, the Soviet army in Afghanistan. Right. Interesting that you mentioned that it's come back around, and now we have the same, will it work, will it not work? But also, which is different from those days, is that now the president has now put a bill in front of Congress for Congress to debate how we're going to fight ISIS and how we're going to fight these different challenges that we have. We've not had a debate on this as a country, and through our Congress at any rate. So congressmen and women are going to be put on the line of how they think and foresee the use of American troops, which thankfully, I mean, the troops seems to be the last people we think of when we go to these wars, and we have a VA that doesn't work. We have situations where they're having a tough time getting jobs. And it's certainly an embarrassment to this country that we don't take better care of our troops when they get out, but we don't put them in better wars where they actually have a chance of winning. So now we're going to have that debate. But in Charlie Wilson's time, at the same time that Charlie Wilson was jamming money to get to the CIA, the CIA didn't want it. And he was forcing them to take it. And he was going over to the CIA, said, take it and let's go over and let's spend it in Afghanistan and let's take on these Russians, right, who defeated us, so to speak, in Vietnam. And he wanted a little payback. That was going on simultaneous that Tip O'Neill, the Speaker of the House, and the Democrats were after Reagan for Iran-Contra.
Right.
So in the same Congress, you had the Democrats going after Reagan for this duplicitous type of a deal where we were selling arms to Iranians to use in our efforts to support the Contras down in Nicaragua. Thank you. And so that, and at the same time, we were actually backing Iraq against Iran. I mean, Iraq was our guys. I mean, we knew about the poison gas that they had, et cetera, that they used against the Iranians. And so we're selling weapons to them secretly. Oliver North and McFarlane and all those guys, right? They got caught up in this. Take the weapons, and I think Israel was involved, right? They had to pass the weapons to Israel, and Israel sold them. You were involved with all that.
Israel was involved. Germany was involved. Everybody was involved during the Afghan war. And everybody wants to defeat the communists. They know they believe that's why so much money was involved. They believe in Afghan, they can defeat it. And same thing right now. If I was I'm repeating again, if I was the government of the United States, use Afghan, because Russia has a big fears from Afghan, because we know how to fight. I'm not saying American don't know, but I don't want to get American get involved, because I don't want a World War III happen.
Yeah.
If you want to help, just bring 20,000, 30,000 Afghan, then we can push them back for you.
So I want to turn to my expert on these type of insurgencies. David Lucere is my partner here and co-host. David Lucere was a Green Beret in Vietnam, and he ran a Mike Force, a counterinsurgency group of Native tribesmen. And he was also a contractor in Iraq and Afghanistan. So David, what do you think about, I mean, the special forces, we're going to have a show here pretty soon with General Fridovich, the third ranking Green Beret in the military at a future show, but and we'll learn more about the mission of the Green Berets and special operators. But David, what do you think about an insurgency? That's how these things operate, right? Our special forces, we're never going to know about it, but we're there now and we're helping and we're thinking about something similar to what Fahim has suggested.
Sure, and it's interesting as we've seen these wars unfold. They've largely been touted as being something new and different and wonderful, but you know, as a Vietnam veteran and participating in those wars in not only Vietnam but Cambodia and Laos, using indigenous personnel, things like that. This is nothing new. They've changed the date on the manual is about all they
Yeah.
did. Dave Petraeus, when he came out with this, big idea about the surge and counterinsurgency, everybody went, wow. Nobody asked us.
The special forces.
Nobody asked special forces because they'd been doing that for 50 years.
Right.
And had real life experience. So nothing really particularly new in that realm as far as counterinsurgency, as far as foreign intervention defense, those kinds of activities, unconventional warfare.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a matter of, picking and choosing where you want to go and where you're going to be most effective.
When Charlie Wilson was buzzing around in the book, now this is a great, great book, but he was asked, he was looking around for how to defeat the Soviets in Afghanistan, and they were brutalizing the Afghans.
Oh,
it was horrible.
they don't believe God. You see, when I was with the American force in Afghanistan, I was asking Captain Vincent, we were got IED blow up and our tires broke.
Just for the listeners, Fahim left his life of privilege after escaping Afghanistan and volunteered after his success in Hollywood to go. He was an interpreter, not in the headquarters with the generals and the colonels. He was out on patrols with the grunts. And for that, we owe him an undying gratitude.
Down in Helmand Province.
Helmand
Yes.
Province.
He was down and dirty with the Marines, at the pointy end of our foreign diplomacy. as
Like
it
we were
turns out.
talking the other day about how we'd probably traveled some of the same ground or close to it,
Right.
because you were in Helmand Province and I spent some time over in Kandahar Province.
And I want to thank you for your
in
service,
08.
sir.
Thank
I
you.
wanna thank
So
you.
Fahim, you were saying, so Fahim is now, he's met Charlie Wilson. Charlie Wilson suggests that he can go help the country. And how does he help the country? By doing it the hard way. He straps it on and goes with the grunts and he's out, and he's saved a lot of American lives and a lot of Afghani lives too.
Oh yeah, I was doing the right translation, and I was telling Captain Vince, Staff Sergeant Cook, why don't you shoot back? He says, Fahim, we believe God. I can destroy the whole village for you, but we're not Russian.
Yeah.
And that was hit me so hard, and I got emotional. Look at this American. They believe God. They're not like a Russian, destroy the whole village. That's why I was so, I got almost tears in my eyes. And I give the experience I had with the Charlie Wilson and the movie, I give them, and I give all my Marines over theirs, and thanks God. I save a lot of life
Yes.
doing the right translation.
And making friends. And
Making
you were
friends.
actually making friends as probably no one else could.